There is no one-size-fits-all or a simple fix when it comes to your well-being. Hi, my name's Josephine, founder of Positivity Center and Wellbeing Consultant, and a person figuring out how to be my best. So join me in conversation with friends, sharing what works for them, and then listen to what works for others so you can create something that will work for you. Well, hello and welcome to today's show. I am your host, Josephine Tite, and I am joined here today by my friend, Sean Burke. Sean, I always love to give my guests a chance to introduce themselves. So if you got a chance to introduce yourselves to the world, what would you say about you?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be on here. Thanks, Josephine. Who am I? I guess I'm a father of two little girls, a husband, and currently on a mission to support people and empower them to show up as their true self. More simply, that's the CEO and founder of Checking In.
So good. So supporting people to show up as their true selves. And I don't know, tell me a little bit more about what that means to you and how does that influence how you show up even just right now here with me?
Yeah, I think, in today's day and age, like people at the end of the day, it's all about trying to put their best foot forward, whether that's on Instagram or social media or, in the office, the typical conversation of how you doing? I'm good. You good? Great. It's like, well, what's underneath that? And who are you really? And how can we help you authentically show up so that we can actually enhance and increase that connection that we have with one another? So for us, showing up as your true self is really just acknowledging where you are and where you're at, and helping you to identify and recognize through that self-awareness, what it is and how you can take steps forwards or process emotions and sit with them.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's so cool that we come to this conversation with a similar lens on well-being, which is that emotional lens. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you a little bit more right about that. And I kind of wanted to ask you, you help the world do that, increase their emotional awareness. And how does the emotional awareness help you, frame your own habits around well-being or living well, if you will?
Well, actually, the whole idea and conception of Checking In was built off of personal experience, and that was, with the last business that I had, and trying to create something with a co-founder, and running into some challenges, and starting to work with a business coach, and then ultimately realizing that the power of self-awareness, the idea of tuning into my energy levels and the emotions that I was feeling, that had such a profound impact on how I started showing up for my colleagues and ultimately my friends and family, that it was like this awakening when it came to understanding what are these emotions and how can they actually serve me. So it was actually through that personal experience that then led me to build out this tool by working with others to see, hey, could this actually help and benefit you as well?
And yes, it could. I took the 30-day challenge. It was awesome. Okay, so it's easy for us to talk about this at a high level. I'm wondering if you can think of, and I'm not sure if something comes to mind right away, but I understand what you say when you say, check in with your energy level, find a way to allow that emotion to serve you. Can you think of like a tangible real life example where that was happening real time? Like, how did that apply?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like almost one that everybody can relate to, if you have kids. Well, your daughter or son walks into the room and they're starting to throw a temper tantrum or whatever it is, and you're sitting there, and maybe it's something about, they don't want butter on their toast. And something that it just is the end of the world, and how they just completely go off into the deep end. As a parent, you're sitting there, and really what you're thinking is, I just want you to eat the damn toast, or get some food in you so that you can go to school and you're not going to be hungry. But the reality is that maybe for them, processing and understanding that the reality of what they're experiencing is valid, and they probably have all these swirl of emotions, but they just don't know how to articulate them. And as a parent, we might be sitting there looking at our kids being like, all my response wants to just say is just eat the damn toast. But how can we actually step back? And easier said than done, and recognize, what's the actual current situation? How is that impacting my thoughts and feelings? And ultimately, how am I then responding in the moment? So understanding, tuning into that energy level. I'm probably a 10 in that moment, and the word is probably frustrated, or, just disappointed or whatever that feeling word is. But that would be like a practical example there for you.
Irritated at best. That would be me.
Irritated. There's a million probably emotions or words you could probably describe that situation.
Yeah, let's increase our emotional vocabulary. I remember being in similar situations. For me, it was like the kids would fight in the car. That was like the worst for me. And I didn't really necessarily develop the tools to handle it in the moment all the time until I talked to a coach that said, actually, why don't you plan when you're not in the number 9 frustrated emotional state, what signs you see kind of leading up to the fighting about to happen, so that you can recognize it and you can ask for permission to step in and say something before it gets to a 9. So, does it work that way too, that you're not always just checking in to just kind of, I guess, notice what's happening in the situation and noticing what is happening with you and others, but even proactively, I guess, if you will, instead of reactively, kind of using the emotion number and feeling?
Oh yeah, there's so much we could talk about on this. And when it comes to literally like checking in, the idea is to build the habit, to build the practice, to be proactive. So if we know how we're feeling before trigger events like this maybe come up, well, we're probably going to have a better ability to actually cope with them when they do come up. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. When you came onto this call, I was not in the screen. It's because I was doing a sprint in place to just up my energy for our show recording, believe it or not, because prior to the recording, I was working on something that wasn't exactly very energizing. So I just purposely did that, knowing and feeling, just sensing that bodily anyways energy, which is connected to an emotion. So what do you do? Like, can you walk us through like a day in the life of Sean Burke? Like, how do you incorporate this into your well-being?
Oh, there you go. Well, it starts very early. I'm definitely a morning person, so usually up around 4:55 is when my alarm goes off. And the first thing I like to do is some sort of meditation or breath work in the morning, and then I'm going to jump on and I'm going to start doing some work. For me, that's when I do my best thinking. I know some people like to say, "Hey, do something for yourself." For me, that's the breath work and the meditation. And it's probably just a quick 5-minute exercise. And then I start my day. My kids are up around 7. So that's when I'm checking out of work, going upstairs, working or getting them ready for school, breakfast, lunches, out the door. I'm the lucky one that gets to drop them off at daycare. So some tears shed usually in that moment. And then it's back to work. And typically, it's right now because of the state that checking in's in, I'm fortunate to be able to touch so many different areas and lead our growing team, which is now up to 8 people. And to try to understand where are there opportunities for us to continue to improve on the product. How are we listening to both employees of companies that we're supporting, but also to the HR leaders and executives that are trying to understand what is the value of bringing in mental health strategies and overall supports for our people. Because we're at an interesting time where never before has there been such a demand and a shift for corporations to start looking at different ways of supporting the well-being of their people. So that comes with a lot of education, a lot of responsibility. And then, at some point in the afternoon, we're probably working on understanding our marketing strategy. How are we getting the word out there and trying to get in front of people to show them the importance of building this mental health strategy for the organizations. And then at some point, there's probably a workout in the afternoon. That's typically when my energy levels dip. So I'll check out again, either do a half an hour bike on the Peloton or go outside for a quick run. And then it's making some dinner, having a great, family sessions again when the kids are home. And that time between 5 to 7:30 is really family focused. So you won't be able to get a hold of me. I'm not answering emails or phone calls. And that's really that dedicated focus time with the family. And then if there's something afterwards that's still kind of loose end that needs to be tied up before the end of the day, I'll be cleaning that up or kind of having a more relaxing evening and then going to bed.
That's so good. So there's some things you mentioned, like the breathing, the meditation, and the structure of your day. Like, it's very systematic. It seems to really Yeah, no,
I'm a robot.
I did talk to, I had a show with a friend of mine, David, and he talks about just having the systems. Like that's, you could look at that as a well-being strategy.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's important to make sure that I have, prioritize family, but I'm also at the end of the day able to get the different, periods in my day where I know what I can focus on and get done. And so having that kind of systematic approach really supports me and my well-being for sure.
Well, you have you've noticed, you've got the awareness to notice when it is that you're going to be at your best. And then you schedule the times when you're going to be at your best around the times that you've got available, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have this never-ending to-do list that is infinitely long. And being okay that it's always that long and that it's never going to be completed is something that I've learned to cope with as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's a lot of people that struggle with to-do lists that are so long. So can you walk us through what you do to be okay with the overwhelmingly long and never-ending list of to-dos?
I think the biggest sort of piece of advice that I was given with to-do lists was just, what about like a completed list? So when you look at your to-do list, it's forever going to be long, and that's great because it means there's always things that you can do, and that you're never going to not have something to do. But at the end of the day, it's like when you step back and look at all the things you have accomplished, that list is usually pretty impressive. So just having that reframe as, it's never enough, or there's always more, as opposed to, wow, we've come really far, or look at all the accomplishments. It really just helps to reprioritize and shift that focus. And then, it does, like I mentioned, prioritization. It helps to be able to say, hey, you know what, this is important today, or oh, something else is a higher priority. And when there's infinite number of things to do, that's super important to stay focused and on task. So that's how I leverage and utilize the lists.
Great advice. Thank you so much. I've learned over time how helpful to-do lists can be, and then how overwhelming they can also be because they help you structure some overwhelm, and at the same time they can create overwhelm. So some great advice for listeners for sure. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's ever been like a catalyst for you, whether it's a person or like a place or a moment or a thought you had. For me, it was literally my hydrangea flowers that I walked by one day and the thought, I can't just let them die. I gotta have to do something about this. And it just created this whole entire analogy about, how we need to feed ourselves and make sure that we're, taking care of our well-being. Has there been a catalyst for you, maybe recently or in the past? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of checking in was really born with that personal experience that I had with my business coach. And so she has been super supportive, Judy Brooks, since day one. And that conversation with Judy was really sort of the light bulb moment where it was, she asked me a question, and it was with my kids. She was like, do you want to be known as the, results driven, focused, determined parent, or do you want to be the loving, kind, empathetic dad? And for me, I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer. And she challenged me and said, well, why would that be any different than with your colleagues? And it was kind of that light bulb moment where it's like, that's really interesting. And it sort of hit home for me, and it challenged, a lot of the different perceptions that I had. And, the next sort of quote that I'll use from Judy was, what got you here may not get you there. And so what was maybe serving me as, focusing on trying to deliver results and understanding that successes were measured based on achieving KPIs, that may not hold true in terms of, my next journey. And that if I want to be able to get to wherever there is, be letting go of that outcome and focusing on the journey was really what that would have been, is all about. So she has definitely been someone who's been so instrumental when it comes to helping me to shape the vision for checking in and ultimately just be a better person and a human and a dad.
And I love it. And I think it's such an inspiring way to almost end the show, because you're talking about who you are in life and business. And it's really the same you. And you get to show up to be your best basically every day because that's what you've decided. I love it. So it's important to not be, I guess I would say it's important not to be connected or attached. It's important to be connected. I should rephrase my words here. Important to be connected to the how, but not so connected to it that it has to be that particular how, that you can be flexible. And with that flexibility, just means you get to, do more of what you love every day. So that's what I hope for you and for everyone who's listening today. So thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening to Wellbeing That Works. Before you go, take 1 minute to write down your takeaway from today's guest. And be sure to download our Wellbeing Evaluation Sheet to help you along your wellbeing journey. And if you've got something to share to inspire others, be sure to be a guest on our show. Until next time, with love and kindness.